Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about, despite the fact, as you probably saw, I'll be departing Digital First in May, I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing and what hopefully will continue on after my departure. You know, one of the things I hear a lot when we're talking about DFM is this persistent thing that we hate print and that we're anti-print and that we don't think about it. And the company is named Digital First, not digital only, not newspapers last. But what we're trying to acknowledge is that the future clearly for media is in digital. I mean, look, I'm looking around here, I see more apples than in an orchard here, all lit up, all these Apple logos lit up across the whole room. So clearly we're headed down the path where digital is where we have to go, and the company was trying to orient itself that way. There's not really a debate, there's a very good debate to be had about the future of print. There isn't much of a debate to be had about the present of print. It still throws off the majority of the revenue in our newsrooms and will continue to for some time. But I think it has to be put in the right context, which is print is a snapshot kind of in this 24/7 ever-moving picture that is digital. It serves a great purpose, and we will continue to have it for a long time. But the consumers, in my mind, the consumers are always going to continue to move to what's the most flexible and what's the thing they can personalize the most. And if you go back to the age of when newspapers were dominant, it wasn't as if we took a poll of the entire country and they said, came back collectively and said it would be awesome if you could throw a pulp of paper on my doorstep at 5 a.m. every day that had all yesterday's news in it. As we all know, it's amazing that we can actually do that. It's a huge effort to do that, and that's the reason they call it the daily miracle. But once the consumer was exposed to digital and once they got once the ability to get information at their own speed and from where they wanted it to, we have to acknowledge that that's going to be the way they're going to continue to go. And the economics, of course, will follow over time. So doesn't mean you don't care about print. It doesn't mean you don't throw a lot of resources into print, but it does require different thinking, different workflow, and different people. Because let's be honest, we know how to do print. This is not a great mystery of how we put out a newspaper every day. This is something we've been doing for quite a long time, and yes, the technology changes there too, but not quite at the pace it's changing in digital. So that's what Thunderdome was born out of, was the idea that we had to have a group of people inside the company who were just thinking about digital and just focusing on digital and helping our newsrooms make that transition, because you know, we criticize newsrooms a lot, and I've done it myself. I'm sure I'll continue to at some point, but to criticize the newsrooms for not changing fast enough. But in fairness to the newsrooms, you're talking about newsrooms that are often 50, 60% smaller than they were 10 years ago. We're being asked to tell stories in a lot of different ways, and sometimes what they don't have is a luxury of time to help make that transition. And so that's, again, where Thunderdome was born from. And while as of this week, it's, you know, sadly, for me at least, it's sadly become like TBD2 Electric Boogaloo. What it stood for, you know, is still stands and still exists in a lot of our newsrooms, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And I think, you know, there's many things that get lost when a big thing like this happens and it gets a lot of coverage. The thing that's not been talked about much is that we still have 2,000 journalists working at Digital First Media who are trying every day to keep fighting this battle and representing communities, hundreds of communities across the country, and they need to succeed, obviously. So I want to talk a little bit about what Thunderdome did to help them. First was training. Training is a criminally underappreciated part of this business. I think sometimes we walk into a newsroom, and even if we buy new equipment, we hand them a video camera and say, now go make video, as if that's just something any average person can go out and do. We ask them to get onto Twitter, and then they get onto Twitter and don't have the slightest idea what the hell to do with this platform, so they start tweeting about lunch and, you know, that stuff, this kind of inane stuff that nobody cares about. So training is really important, and we have done more than 20,000 sort of man hours or person hours of training in the last couple of years, whether it's on SEO, it's on social media, it's on shooting video, it's on data development, and we've been to probably 2/3 of our newsrooms to do that kinds of training to make sure that those skills start to get ingrained into those newsrooms. Can they do all of that stuff wholly? No, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we helped support newsrooms that at least understood why data was important, but didn't necessarily have the resources to do it. I'll get to that in a second. The key thing that we did, that Thunderdome did, and will continue to do for the next month or so while it winds down, is decentralized services for the company. We have, again, 75 newsrooms, a lot of them very small, mid-size, a couple of large ones. Even the ones who understand that, you know, God, it would be great if we could do a data, you know, do a crime map, even something as kind of simple as a crime map, don't have anybody in those newsrooms that has any idea how to build that. So beyond us training them to do light data development, we've actually been building a lot of things for the newsroom. So that even the Denver Post, our largest paper and best paper, has a crime map now that was built out of Thunderdome. The St. Paul Pioneer Press has a data map that was built out of Thunderdome. We've done data projects that we can share across the entire company. We did one for the NCAA tournament that allowed you to compare any two teams in the tournament, pick which factors you thought were the most important, and it would tell you the percentile chance that which team was going to win the game. Something that any paper can take, any paper can put up, and it drives reader interest in a common topic like the NCAA tournament. Video, we've done a lot. We have brought the bar up in terms of what the company does in terms of video dramatically. We did a partnership with a company called Tout that a lot of you probably know that launched about 6 months ago, and we've gone from doing 300 or 400 video pieces a month across the country to about 20,000 a month. Now, if you know Tout, a lot of it is short form video, and we do about 5,000 touts a week now across the 75 papers, and we've had a couple hit and go viral, but what it's done is it's ingrained this idea that capture the moment. In fact, now the thing that seems to be hot on Tout is we seem to be filming the end of every high school basketball game that's close, and every time somebody hits a 30-foot shot, to win the game, we've got it on video, and we put it up, and it gets, tens of thousands of page views. So we've ingrained the idea that capturing a moment in video sometimes is going to be far better than anything you could write about that moment. And so we have people shooting video now, and that deal was really brokered out of Thunderdome and driven into the company by the folks at Thunderdome. Curation, we've done a massive amount of curation, and I think have taught that it's very important not just to put your own work out there, but to try to curate around a story of interest, many different sources. If you go to the home pages of any of our sites, you'll see something in the right rail called the Social Media Wire, which is basically a compendium of all sorts of Twitter feed and YouTube feeds of anything that's about that particular community. It's not just our stuff on the homepage, it's anything that's being written about Cleveland or St. Paul or Chico, California. And so starting to see the value of curation is important. Breaking news, we do a phenomenal amount of breaking news blogging out of Thunderdome around any big event, planned or unplanned, the Oscars, the Fort Hood shootings of the other day, which allows all of our papers, A, to just take that content and put it on their homepage, but more importantly, to understand the power of having a story that's evolving by the minute and have it on your homepage in a way that's away from the traditional write-through that we've been doing in print for a long time. And then we were able to provide a lot of resources for massive stories like Newtown, where we were able to send about 15 people from New York up to Connecticut, video journalists, editors, reporters up there to help cover that story, which, even though we have sizable papers up there, was too large for even those papers, to handle. So we've made a lot of that transition over the last few years, and the results, I'm very proud of them. The Denver Post is the only two newspapers in the United States to win Pulitzer Prizes each of the last 4 years. The New York Times, you might have heard of them, and the Denver Post. And Denver Post is one of our papers. But what's less known about that is that those last two Pulitzers were each one off of things that were largely done online. Craig Walker won a few years ago for feature photography for tracking a veteran suffering from PTSD throughout the year, in which some of the photos appeared in the paper, but very few. It was really an online presentation. And last year they won for breaking news for the coverage of the Aurora shooting, which happened literally as the paper went to bed. And so the first 18 hours of coverage, 20 hours of coverage of that story was all done online. And if you saw their entry to the Pulitzer, it focused almost primarily on their online coverage. So that's something we're very proud of. Like the Los Angeles Area News Group, which is a handful or a dozen papers down in LA, have completely started to work together, redone their workflow, shooting video like crazy, have really embraced all of the things that we have pushed at Thunderdome into a newsroom that's completely different than it was 18 months ago. The York Daily Record was just named by editor and publisher one of the newsrooms that does it right, largely because if you go sit in their newsroom every day, their workflow is all based on keeping their websites and their mobile sites updated, and they do view print as something they want to focus on for, long enough to put out a good product, but not have the day built around it. And so the York Daily Record has been a star in our solar system. And even the Torrington Register Citizen, which invites readers into its newsroom to sit in on the news meeting if they want to, or many of our papers which put their budgets up online early in the day so that readers can help give them tips or help push them forward in what their coverage is going to be. So if you look around the company, we've made a tremendous amount of progress there. We've also put the equipment into the hands of every one of our reporters actually has a company-paid phone now, and we've really spent money actually in this tough time to actually make sure they have the right digital tools. So yeah, the transition is tough. And the irony is lost on me of standing up here today saying the transition is tough. But it does need to happen, and I know it's easy sometimes to feel like innovation in a legacy newsroom is like that poor ensign who goes down to the planet with Kirk and Spock and Bones, who never comes home. It's always the first to die. But it can be done. It needs to be done. We have to keep pushing on that. And the worst thing you can do when something like this happens, when, it's been lovely to get all the kind thoughts about the demise of Thunderdome and lovely to get all the personal message I've got even from a lot of people in this room about it. But the one thing I would urge is, when these kind of things happen, we have to stop acting like this draws some large picture about the future of digital media. This was an effort that we made inside a company that had a significant impact on the journalists that are still going to be there when this is all over. And so to draw it as some kind of broad bellwether that means, oh my God, this is just a sign that this kind of innovation can't work in a legacy newsroom, or nobody should build an operation like this again, I think draws the wrong conclusion. We still need to keep trying and failing, and the only way to ultimate success is to keep trying these things and learning from them. So hopefully people will not, I don't think any of us who worked at Thunderdome feel like this was a waste of a minute of our time. I think it was a great ride, and hopefully the right lessons will be drawn from it and not too much focus on the end of it. Thank you.